1948, Kuwait. Deep in the Burgan Basin, engineers conduct a high-pressure chemical stimulation on a super-deep exploration well. A mechanical valve fails under sudden hydrostatic load, triggering an explosive high-pressure hydrocarbon blowout. Friction against the sheared casing throws an incendiary spark directly into the expanding gas jet. Unique geological fractures channel the fire straight down into an untapped, pressurized prehistoric petroleum pocket. The limestone ceiling collapses, forming a yawning crater over 2 kilometers wide that turns into a roaring furnace. Within 48 hours, emergency crews realize conventional chemical foams and water cannons are entirely useless against the subterranean inferno. The subterranean reservoir begins drawing in atmospheric air through secondary fissure lines, creating a self-sustaining underground firestorm. The Middle Eastern oil grid collapses as personnel abandon nearby fields amid suffocating heat and toxic gases. A monolithic plume of dense, oily black soot ascends 18 kilometers into the stratosphere. The burning crude contains dense bitumen chains and heavy sulfur polymers that resist natural atmospheric dispersion. High-altitude jet streams seize the particulate column, dragging a continuous ribbon of soot across global latitudes. Within 8 months, an opaque aerosol shroud stretches across the Mediterranean, the Caucasus, and the Indian subcontinent. Daylight across southern Europe fades into a perpetual, sickly, reddish twilight that generates no measurable radiant heat. Solar radiation absorption drops by 40%, triggering unseasonal blizzards and frost across former agricultural zones. Governments convene emergency scientific committees in Geneva, realizing the atmospheric particulate mass is compounding daily. The phenomenon is officially classified across secret diplomatic cables under the operational codename Blind Horizon. 2 years into the Kuwaiti blowout, the carbon ash canopy locks into a permanent stratospheric layer worldwide. Global illumination drops to values equivalent to a moonlit midnight, ending standard daylight operations across all continents. Thermometers plunge globally, bringing permafrost conditions into central latitudes and freezing river navigation across Europe and North America. Ocean currents stall as surface temperature differentials vanish, causing the Atlantic conveyor to grind to a halt. Public infrastructure scrambles to adapt, installing continuous high-voltage carbon arc floodlights along urban transit corridors. Civilian populations suffer severe circadian rhythm collapse, triggering widespread neurological disorders and chronic depression. Global economies abandon standard financial instruments, tying national credits directly to coal reserves, copper wire, and combustible oils. The era of the open sky ends, replaced by an artificial landscape of heavy machinery, glaring lanterns, and freezing mist. Deprived of essential ultraviolet and visible solar spectra, terrestrial flora enters a catastrophic, terminal decline. Photosynthesis halts across the great grain belts of the American Midwest, the Eurasian steppes, and the Yangtze Valley. Cereal crops rot directly into the freezing topsoil, instantly obliterating 70% of global food production. Mass starvation sweeps across urban centers, sparking widespread riots that overwhelm metropolitan police forces. Wild animal populations collapse along the food chain, leaving forests and plains littered with frozen, emaciated carcasses. The price of canned preserves, refined sugars, and dried grains surges beyond the reach of ordinary working citizens. Martial law is declared across major world capitals, authorizing armed forces to confiscate all private food stocks. Humanity realizes that natural agriculture is permanently extinct beneath the impenetrable soot canopy. Faced with total surface starvation, governments shift resources to sealed subterranean infrastructure projects. Excavation begins on massive industrial shelter complexes, officially designated hydraulic citadels. The United States initiates Project Hydrotor, carving immense vault networks beneath the granite mass of the Rocky Mountains. These citadels rely on deep geothermal steam turbines and sealed artesian aquifers to power subterranean hydroponic farms. Thousands of labourers work around the clock in cavernous galleries beneath blinding violet-ultraviolet growth lamps. Every milliliter of fluid, including atmospheric condensation and industrial runoff, is reclaimed through closed-loop scrubbers. Citizens are relocated from freezing suburban districts into cramped, steel-reinforced dormitory tiers deep in the bedrock. Survival is secured at the cost of personal liberty, regimented entirely by centralized life support allocations. Paramilitary security units, designated the Water Gendarmerie, are mobilized to maintain internal discipline within the citadels. Troops wearing pressurized, rubberized suits, brass respirators, and lead-weighted trench gear patrol all hydraulic distribution corridors. Unauthorized tampering with fluid filtration lines or moisture collectors is classified as capital treason, punishable by immediate execution. Water quotas are dispensed strictly through perforated lead ration tokens, calibrated directly to a worker's daily industrial output. Civilians live under constant surveillance, reporting to mandatory fluid reclamation checkpoints after every work shift. The gendarmerie evolves into a ruthless bureaucratic caste, occupying the well-lit, heated upper tiers of the subterranean arcologies. Strikes and civil unrest in the lower machine decks are suppressed with chemical gas weapons and high-pressure steam cannons. Human society reorganizes into an unyielding, militarized technocracy centered entirely around thermodynamic preservation. Continuous stratospheric precipitation deposits billions of tons of greasy, petroleum-derived ash across the planetary surface. The black dust coats rivers, lakes, and oceans, forming a foul, hydrocarbon-rich crust that destroys municipal water intakes. Outdoor air turns lethal, saturated with microscopic abrasive carbon filaments that cause catastrophic lung scarring within hours. Surface workers, designated ash walkers, operate heavy tracked snowplows while sealed inside pressurized brass diving suits. Urban architecture calcifies into blackened, featureless monoliths as oily soot cakes onto concrete facades and lead roofs. Ground transportation is restricted to heavy, steam-driven tracked crawlers equipped with multi-stage centrifugal air separators. Cities not retrofitted with reinforced dome canopies are abandoned to the freezing dark, buried under drifting mounds of soot. The surface of planet Earth becomes a dead, frozen industrial desert, swept by howling, zero-visibility blackouts. Commercial aviation and maritime shipping collapse completely as surface navigation beacons fail and harbours freeze solid. The North Atlantic transforms into a jagged, impassable plain of black ice, entrapping hundreds of abandoned cargo freighters. Transatlantic communication is severed when shoreline terminal stations freeze over and deep undersea cables snap under shifting ice packs. Sovereign nations dissolve into isolated bunker clusters, completely cut off from regional and international allies. Governments communicate exclusively through heavily armoured, subterranean copper telegraph lines strung through deep rail tunnels. Radio signals are smothered by perpetual high-altitude static charges generated by the abrasive soot clouds. Global trade is reduced to sporadic exchanges of coal, refined lubricants, and heavy machine parts along fortified underground rail links. Each bunker metropolis becomes an inward-looking survival engine, fighting an unending battle against mechanical wear and cold. In a desperate gambit to extinguish the Kuwaiti blowout, the Soviet Union and Western allies greenlight Operation Atomic Extinguisher. A coordinated salvo of deep strata thermonuclear charges is detonated within perimeter shafts surrounding the burning crater. The explosions trigger intense regional earthquakes, fracturing deep subterranean strata across hundreds of square kilometers. Instead of sealing the vents, the shockwaves rupture secondary gas reservoirs, expanding the crater into an 8-kilometer inferno. The ascending plume absorbs millions of curies of volatile fissile isotopes, lofting radioactive material directly into the stratospheric soot cloud. Radiation monitoring stations across Eurasia and Africa register extreme off-scale spikes in atmospheric gamma activity. The hope of mechanically extinguishing the subterranean firestorm is permanently crushed by the disastrous radioactive backfire. 1 year following the atomic detonations, black, radioactively hot snow begins falling continuously across the northern hemisphere. The toxic sleet settles over domes, exhaust towers, and air intake arrays, creating severe localized radiation hotspots. Precipitation fails to melt during the bitter, dark summers, accumulating into dense, radioactive glaciers across urban ruins. Radiation penetrates shallow bunker sectors, triggering acute radiation sickness, cellular degradation, and birth defects among survivors. Citadel authorities order the permanent welding of outer access blast doors and the abandonment of surface-level monitoring posts. Civilization is forced to excavate deeper into the lower crust, moving residential wards 4 kilometers beneath the frozen surface. Surface expeditions are strictly forbidden, leaving remaining observation tasks to hardwired external cameras and pneumatic probes. The world above becomes a lethal zone of freezing darkness, radioactive ash storms, and howling sub-zero gales. Deep subterranean enclaves enter a state of severe, irreversible technological and social degradation. Precision manufacturing tools wear out without replacement parts, forcing engineers to hand-forge vital life support components from scrap iron. Underground archives suffer heavy rot and moisture damage, resulting in the permanent loss of advanced scientific and cultural knowledge. Subterranean populations grow increasingly pale and emaciated, sustained solely by tasteless, synthesized protein paste and recycled water. Art, philosophy, and historical education are struck from citadel protocols, replaced by technical drills on steam boiler pressure management. Generations emerge who have never experienced natural breezes, open horizons, or the concept of a blue sky. Human life is reduced to a bleak, mechanical cycle of 12-hour boiler maintenance shifts and mandatory sleep periods. The will to reclaim the surface evaporates, replaced by a dull, fatalistic acceptance of permanent subterranean confinement. 1959. 11 years after the first blowout in the Kuwaiti desert. Above the frozen, soot-choked ruins of Western Europe, an anomalous atmospheric downdraft temporarily thins the dense stratospheric soot veil. For less than 2 minutes, a single pale yellow shaft of authentic sunlight pierces the gloom, illuminating a frozen communication spire. The fleeting light is witnessed only through a cracked lead glass periscope by an aging, terminally ill watchman in an upper observation cupola. He stares at the blinding gold light on the iron framework, remembering the warm summer afternoons of his long-lost youth. Before he can alert the lower command deck, the shifting high-altitude jet stream drags a wall of heavy black smoke back across the gap. The sky seals shut once more, locking the planet into eternal, radio-opaque, freezing darkness. You have watched the declassified file of Project Blind Horizon 1948. Subscribe to Alternative Outline 20th, click the bell icon, and share your theories in the comments below. Share this video with fans of hard alternate history and realistic dieselpunk. Thank you for watching.